It wasn't easy because why would it ever be for the Dolphins this season? But Miami prevails over the Browns 20-3 without their starting quarterback and moves to 8-8 on the season. We're breaking everything down here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, the author of Touchdown Miami and the NFL Draft Lead for the 33rd team. Want to give a special shout out and thank you to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. The Dolphins prevailing over the Cleveland Browns in Week 17 by a final score of 20-3 to move to 8-8 on the season, keeping their slim playoff hopes alive, although the mathematics of that have been simplified. The Dolphins need a win against the New York Jets next weekend and a Denver Broncos loss to the Kansas City Chiefs, who have clinched the number 1 seed in the AFC. And the Dolphins will be the 7 seed in the AFC playoffs, which if you told me that the Dolphins, after 2-6, would be playing a mathematically relevant football game, and I choose my words there very carefully, a mathematically relevant football game for the postseason picture in Week 18, I wouldn't have believed you, but they've gone 6-2 over their last 8 games, and this one, as Mike McDaniel loves to say, adversity is opportunity. And boy, oh boy, did the Dolphins get their fair share of opportunity this week, because Tua Tagovailoa, it was first reported on Saturday that his status was getting downgraded from questionable to doubtful for the game. There was some hope from a lot of fans that this was, if the Dolphins are mathematically eliminated from the postseason, then they won't play him. Well, the Bengals beat the Broncos, and then Tua still doesn't dress for the game and sits. And Mike McDaniel said after the game it was something that was aggravated and compounded with a hit taken against San Francisco for an injury that was originally suffered against Houston. And they didn't feel he had the strength and functionality that he needed coming into this game. And as a result, Tyler Huntley gets the start. And I'll give Tyler Huntley his flowers for sure. He led the team in rushing with 7 carries for 52 yards and an 18-yard run. Had a couple of big-time runs in the second half, including a touchdown run down in the red zone. He had an opportunity where he gets out of the grasp of a pass rusher and runs for 18 as they're trying to milk the clock in the fourth quarter of this football game. And Tyler Huntley made some plays. Tyler Huntley had some confident throws. Was it the precision timing element of the passing game that you've been used to seeing for the Dolphins? No, it was not. But that's a backup quarterback, right? He hasn't gotten reps all season long. And I'll give Tyler his credit for this. Most backup quarterbacks across the league are traditionally chaos merchants in that they have athleticism to them. They're a little bit more unpredictable. Tyler Huntley did not play a chaos merchant game. I thought he played as well as you could within the situations that he was afforded. There was a lot of bad as a team. There's a lot of bad run blocking. This team finished with 74 rushing yards on 27 carries. The numbers look better if you take out the 11-yard loss on a Malik Washington end around when you had just got a nice gain on a completion of Tyreek Hill, and you promptly give it all back with an 11-yard loss because you can't run traditional run game work. You'd be 26 for 85, but 52 of those came on 7 Tyler Huntley scrambles. Devon Achane finishes with 10 carries for 25 yards, Jeff Wilson 3 for 5, and Raheem Mostert 6 for 3. And that included an 8-yard run. That means his other 5 carries went for -5 yards. We did the offensive line platoon thing at guard again with Liam Eichenberg and Isaiah Wynn. I don't know why. I think the evaluation and the assessment, and yes, Isaiah Wynn took a pretty silly penalty early in this game where Miami was moving the ball well in their first drive and then spontaneously combusted the moment they got on the fringes of scoring territory and just directly went backwards. And it was not the only time that they did that in this game. They get an interception from Tyrell Dotson, who promptly takes his helmet off and loses 15. And then on the next 2 plays and the pre-snap before the third play, they lose another 20 yards. So they went backwards 30 yards, 35 yards after an interception at the 50-yard line. And these things are just littered throughout this football game. It's a win. It's clubbed up. And we celebrate wins because they're hard to come by. You celebrate wins because that's why you play the games. I'll say for me personally, and like my time covering the team, and this goes back to like Dolphins Wire with USA Today for 2 years, starting in, I think it was 2019 was when I started with that work. And I've been doing Locked On Dolphins since Travis Wingfield left and got the opportunity he has with the team. And that was in January of 2020. We're coming up on like 5, 6, 7 years of covering this football team. This is as unfulfilled as I feel after a win, with mathematically being alive for the playoffs, just because it was all of the same Mike McDaniel coached team stuff. 2.7 yards per carry, 11 penalties for 94 yards. You had 7 penalties for 65 yards in the first half. You went 0 for 5 on third down in the first half. You go 2 of 12 on third and fourth down for the game. Every chunk play is brought back by a holding penalty. Not every chunk play, but you have drive killer after drive killer after drive killer where it's like, man, like, okay, we can get this thing rolling here. Thank goodness Dorian Thompson-Robinson's the starting quarterback on the other side. The Browns went 0 for 3 in the red zone. They got penalized 9 times for 84 yards. They turned the ball over twice. They go 0 for 4 on fourth down, including setting up the touchdown that decided the game to make it a 17-point deficit because they went for it inside their own 30-yard line and didn't get it because of a magnificent play from Jordan Brooks, who was one of the bright spots for the Dolphins in this team on this day in Cleveland with a 20-3 victory. And I don't mean to come off like super nitpicky or whiny, but with what was at stake, I got a great deal of respect for the way that Tyler Huntley played in the game, but the rest of the team, you got bad net punts. You got penalties on special teams, guys running out of bounds by themselves. Offensively, the holding penalties, personal fouls. It was tough. I'll give the defense a lot of credit for it came in with a strong matchup that it was expected to control and dictate the game. And it did. They conceded 276 yards of offense and 3.6 yards per play against the Browns. Dorian Thompson-Robinson averaged less than 3.5 yards per pass through an interception. You sacked him once. You drew like 4 intentional grounding penalties, 3 intentional grounding penalties on him. So there were ways in which, I think the defense should be really proud and hang their hat on the way that they performed in a matchup in which they had an expectation of which to perform. Forcing the team to go 0 for 3 in the red zone. Jalen Ramsey with a PBU in a critical spot on a fourth down in the red zone. Moments like that are great. But you knew this, just as I knew this coming into this game, because we talked about it last week, and we talked about it the week before against Houston. Fundamentally flawed football team. There's a fourth down where you run a fake inside run with a pivot toss outside, and you lose yardage on 4th and 1, 4th and inches, because you can't run the ball between tackles, or you choose not to run the ball between the tackles. And then you'll be asked about it in a press conference, and you'll say, oh, well, we're a strong side outside zone rushing offense. And then you go 4 possessions without calling a single strong side outside zone. So it's all about weathering the storm as best as you can with what you have, because you are what you are at this point. The most promising development was the play of Tyler Huntley, because within the structure of what he was given and asked to do, took more sacks. I think he was sacked 4 times. by the Browns and had several other opportunities where he held the ball, and then maybe there were opportunities to avoid negative plays in those instances and situations. But this was a different player for sure, I thought, than the one who took the field for you when he first got here in the first month of the season. And that's something that is that good enough to be your QB2 long-term after Tyler Huntley said at the beginning of the week that the teams talked to him about bringing him back or talked to his agent about bringing him back. That's a story for another day. But at least this body of work you can look at and say, you did what was necessary to win a football game when the Dolphins needed it in a big spot. We're going to talk a little bit more about Tua Tagovailoa and his status for this game and then the development of it next here on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure that you stick with us. Has Rocket Money helped find you any savings on subscriptions you've forgotten about or that you were paying for perhaps twice? It's happened to all of us. It's happened to me. It's easy to sign up for subscriptions with taps on your phone and you forget about it. Rocket Money has made it easy to track all of those subscriptions down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is the personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spendings, and help lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together into one place, whether it's your subscriptions, your spending habits, or your goals for the upcoming year. Rocket Money has saved over 5 million users, a total of 500 million plus in canceled subscription, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon, rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right. So we talked about the game. And we'll give out some game balls here. The Dolphins stave off elimination. They move up to the 8th spot in the AFC conference. Need a win and a Broncos loss next week against the Chiefs to earn the right to play an 18th game this season. And all of the teams in the running here are flawed football teams, right? The Bengals run the ball about as well as the Dolphins do. Their defense is metrically significantly worse, but they've been firing on all cylinders offensively for the past 2 months on an absolute tear. Could win a shootout with anybody if they got into the dance. The Dolphins, their issues running the ball are evident. Their game management from a challenges perspective, for example, or a flow of a play calling perspective, or a pass protection offensive line perspective, or a pass rush perspective. Those are all flaws that the Dolphins have as a team. The Colts were eliminated. They gave up 45 points to the Giants and lost. The Giants that came into the week as the team having the number 1 overall pick. So it's down to the Broncos, the Dolphins, and the Chiefs, and the Bengals for the 7th seed. And I can see a world where you would win a game with Snoop Huntley next Sunday against the New York Jets and do your part of the dance, if you will, that's going to take place. I'd assume all these games are going to take place in the same time slot. But if you're going to have any chance of postseason success, that's where you're going to need your starting quarterback, because he does bring a lot more layers to things that you can do. And you saw a lot of the operational issues, the launch point in the pocket. It looked like there was more than one occasion where there was supposed to be a motion and the motion wasn't called and the ball was snapped. And a player's looking around after the play, wondering what the heck happened with what the call was made. The false starts. There was a snap exchange that happened where Snoop is trying to change the play at the line of scrimmage and the center snaps the ball. And all of that stuff showed up again. And it's all the stuff that underscores the complexities of how this offense is run, and the orchestrator of it being Tua Tagovailoa in a playoff environment is going to give you the best chance to win, right? But this hip injury, and from what I understand, the hip injury, and Mike McDaniel said as much as well, is nothing to do with the hip injury that he suffered at Alabama. It's in a different spot on his hip. So I've heard that privately in addition to what has been said publicly. Mike McDaniel said after the game it was more so about the functionality of it that yielded their decision. I don't know how much I believe Mike McDaniel got to Thursday and made a whole separate game plan, and we started doing two different game plan installs at once and so on and so forth and blah, 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 blah. I don't know. And don't forget, coaches lie to you sometimes. They'll get up on the podium and they'll lie because it's what's in the best interest of protecting their players or their competitive advantage or whatever else is out there. So I don't know whether or not Tua Tagovailoa is going to dress on Week 18 against the Jets. You would like to think in a must-win situation, although the Dolphins just had this, your starting quarterback would go. Because there's quarterbacks out there. Derek Carr in 2017 plays with a fractured transverse a fracture on his vertebrae. Ben Roethlisberger plays 10 games with a broken foot, right? Phillip Rivers plays a game with an ACL. Josh Allen played 2 months worth of games earlier this season with a broken left hand, right? There's instances of this and all different stylistic kinds of quarterbacks too. And I understand the mobility within the pocket is important for Tua Tagovailoa because that's how he does evade pressure and his ability to get to the top of the drop on time and play with timing. And I understand that that's important for him as a player with who he is and his strengths and how it helps the offense go when it's designed and tailored and called to him being in there. I don't know exactly what your risks are if he plays. And I know there's a lot of Dolphins fans that this is kind of the final nail in the coffin for their individual appetite for Tua Tagovailoa and talking about drafting a replacement and the exit ramp on his contract and this, that, the other thing. And like you are all well within your rights to believe whatever it is you want to believe. I would like to find out a little bit more about this hip injury before I get too upset about any party that's involved. It's obviously super disappointing because this is the opportunities that you play for. This is the reason why you as Tua Tagovailoa come back from injuries like the ones he suffered at the beginning of the season, is to have opportunities like this to lead your team into a playoff berth from 2-6. Like that's like a legacy opportunity. You get into the playoffs, you win a playoff game, and you bring this team all the way back and you find a way to make some kind of postseason run. I'm not sitting here telling you any of this is going to happen. But like that's the good stuff. And to get to this point and have it come to a screeching halt, it's just a gut punch for everybody involved. And it's a sobering reminder that the durability issues with Tua Tagovailoa, unfortunately, are not going away. And I would like to think, I don't know what the exact specifics of the injury is, but if you get to a certain point and the rewards that you're out there playing for reach a certain magnitude, and potentially punching a postseason berth would be on that list for me, you'd let him go out there and play, even if he's not 100%, and not treat him with bubble wrap. And I'm not saying exactly that's what happened in this instance, but when you hear things in the reporting of it, as Tua Tagovailoa is still pushing to play, Tua wants to play, Mike McDaniel says Tua wanted to play. The reporting, the fact that the reporting specified that he wanted to play, the fact that the reporting indicated that it was not a major injury. Okay, when that's the breadcrumbs that you give people, what kind of reaction do you think people are going to have? Tua's doubtful. He wants to play, but he's probably not going to play. And it's not a major injury, but he's still not going to play. I would like to think the competitor that Tua Tagovailoa is, and this is from everything that I've heard publicly and privately throughout the course of this season about what's been going on behind closed doors at practices at the facility. From a culture standpoint, Tua is a lot of the things that you want and is right with elements of the locker room. Not saying it's a perfect locker room, not saying that the culture is in a place that we should all be really happy about. And heaven have helped us if the Dolphins had lost this game with Tua not playing. That would have got real ugly. And the commentary that I would have had would have been a lot more pointed than what it is right now. But I'm still disappointed in the situation that we find ourselves in. And you're not going to find me saying anything other than they need additional viable options and not economically cheap ones. And they need to fight the urgency of complacency and just saying, well, Tyler Huntley played good in Cleveland in week 17. Let's sign him to be the backup and roll tide, so to speak. I don't think so. You got to invest in this backup quarterback position even more than just bringing back Tyler Huntley in my mind. But Tyler Huntley played very well against Cleveland, especially all things considered, the fact that you had no running game, so to speak of. And you had what felt like an offense that had all the same bells and whistles, even though there was some discrepancies in how early they were getting up to the line of scrimmage, which was a common theme from last week as well. We're going to talk about some game balls from this game that's coming your way next here on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure that you stick with us. Shout out Tyreek Hill. 9 targets, 9 receptions, 105 yards. Very efficient today. A couple of key performances. Had the team's longest reception of the day, 25 yards, which was nearly a house call if he'd have broken extra tackle. Tyreek, please. You want to get 1,000 yards this season, please. Stop running backwards. Stop running sideways. Just get north and pick up the extra 6 yards. I about pulled my hair out. And I used to not have hair for all of the comments I still continue to see about the Ace Ventura hair, the Mel Kiper hair, the pompadour, whatever you want to call it. I almost pulled it all back out again, watching Tyreek run sideways and backwards on a couple of occasions in this game. Malik Washington had a tough drop with Miami backed up in the shadow of their own goalpost, but had a clutch catch there just before half to kind of set up the field goal that set up Miami to take a 6-3 lead into halftime. Bobbling reception, really tough, good concentration. Bummer he had what I thought was not a winning play call with the end around to lose 11 yards. But offensively, Tyler Huntley's your game ball recipient. Two total touchdowns. He had 4 incompletions on 26 attempts, led the team in rushing, had a couple of key conversions with his legs. That's as good of a backup quarterback performance as we've seen for the Dolphins in the entirety of the Mike McDaniel era. I mean, Skylar Thompson, Teddy Bridgewater, we didn't have backup quarterback play last year. Tim Boyle, Skylar Thompson again. This was a really nice performance against a team that didn't have a lot of punch offensively. You were playing an uphill battle at times with the field position game that you were trying to play and keep it close to the vest. And they did what they needed to do. I thought Jordan Brooks had himself an outstanding game. Tyrell Dotson, obviously 15 total tackles, tied with Jordan Brooks for solo tackles, had the interception. Nice performance there. Shout out to Emmanuel Agba, who played what I felt was probably his most impactful game that he's played. And he played well last week, too. He's had a nice 2-week stretch after what I thought was like a really underwhelming, probably 2-month stretch for Emmanuel. I thought the last 2 weeks have been really solid for him. And he has the strip sack that leads to the recovery by Deshaun Hand for a turnover. I'd probably give this. I'm going to give out 2, and it's to Miami's 2 linebackers. I'm going to give Jordan Brooks and Tyrell Dotson game balls. If I was going to go with a tiebreaker, I would probably punish Tyrell Dotson for the 15-yard penalty that he had, taking his helmet off after the interception that set Miami up at the 50-yard line to promptly go back to the 35, and that was as far forward as they got on that possession. Jason Sanders, special teams, shout out. It was nice to see Tyreek Hill get an opportunity. He had an 18-yard return. Malik Washington had 2 returns as well. Jake Bailey, 7 punts, as many touchbacks as he had punts inside the 20. I thought it was a frustrating day from him in that regard when you consider they punted from their own 46, and they punt. So we had a 35-yard punt on our first punt of the day. We're going to do the thing to finish up. We punted from the plus 44 and punted into the end zone for a net of 24 yards on our second punt. Our third punt punted from our own 47 and put it like 8 yards back in the end zone for a touchback. So that was a net of 33 yards, but then there was an unnecessary roughness that was enforced from the 20. So you got bailed out there, even though you had another net inside 35 yards. You punted 41 yards to the 33, but with a 9-yard return after a missed tackle. So that was a net of 32 yards on another punt. You went 3 plays, 1 yard on your second possession of the second half, and you had a 40-yard net punt. You kicked from your own 30 and kicked it to the Cleveland 30-yard line. You had another punt that went out of bounds. This was the penalty on Saron Neal for going out of bounds. This was your best punt, and it was from your own 8-yard line, and you managed to kick it 42 yards, but then there was a 5-yard penalty, so the net there was under 40 yards again. And then the last punt that you had was your best punt of the day, where you got pinned on the 2-yard line because the returner let it drop, expecting that it was going to kick back and gets down at the 2 with a nice bounce and roll. So it took 7 tries to get a good, strong effort in the kicking game from a punt perspective, but we did get one. And I would also mention on Jason Sanders' first field goal, he spun the laces the wrong way and turned the laces into Jason Sanders kicking the ball on the one that bounced off the crossbar. So not a banner day for Jake Bailey. And I think that's another part of the frustrations of a game like this, even though you won by 17 points and played a bad Browns football team and won the game, right, which is the bottom line. But it's all the same things are still present. And I think that's important because a lot of fans have the concern that you're going to get to the end of the season, and whether you make the playoffs or not, if you beat the Jets and you finish 9-8, they'll pull the wool over their eyes and they'll say, Tua missed 4 games. We probably win 2 of them if he plays. We'd be an 11-6 football team again, but you'd be the same flavor of 11-6 football team that you were this year. You're no closer to answering the questions. And in some phases, your team got significantly worse. So I'm fired up about the win. I want to finish with a winning record. But I've been on the record the last 2 months saying winning games should not prevent you from having the difficult conversations about the fundamental issues around the football team. And I'd like to think the team that fired Brian Flores after winning 8 of their last 9 games to finish 9-8 and do the same thing is capable of having those same conversations again. And there's some ideological shifts that have to happen. I think there's some coaching staff changes that need to happen. I think there's a leadership dynamic that needs to change. And all of those, the evidences and clues and breadcrumbs of all of those things exist in a game like this, from everything from how the Tua Tagovailoa injury was handled to the backup quarterback spot behind him to special teams issues and shortcomings and running game issues and shortcomings that make it harder, and missing your best 2 pass rushers that you have on the roster and making you harder to you sack Dorian Thompson-Robinson 1 time. All of those things exist. And that's okay. For now, you are what you are. Can you find a way to win 1 more football game and see what happens? That's the big question right now. We'll break down the game tape. We'll get a little bit more into some of the individual performances from this game for Miami and look at them under a microscope here a little bit later in the week before we get to prepping for the Jets. Week 18 has arrived, and I think it's fitting. I wanted to make sure I mentioned this. Week 17 for the Miami Dolphins has been a cursed experience for the past 8 years when you really stop and think about it. So 2023, the Dolphins in week 17 lost 56-19 to the Baltimore Ravens and lost Bradley Chubb in that game. That was 2023 in week 17. 2022 in week 17, you blew a second half lead. Teddy Bridgewater gets hurt. You throw a pick six in the second half of the game. You lose to a bad New England Patriots team, 23-21, to lose your fifth straight game and put your season on the brink before you beat the Jets 11-6 in week 18. But I don't think Chubb played in that game. Tron Armstead didn't play in that game. There were a bunch of guys that didn't play in that game. Tua obviously did not play in that game. So you lost to the Patriots on the road by 2 to drop to 8-8. In 2021, you lost to the Titans in week 17 by a final score of 34-3. You got smoked. And it was playing for your playoff lives at that stretch. 2020 in week 17, you lost to the Bills 56-26. Turned the ball over 4 times on offense. It was a winner-go-home scenario. You're in Buffalo. They played their backups in the second half, and you gave up 56 points. You have to go back to 2019 for the last time the Dolphins won a game in week 17. And that was when you won 2 games in a row to go from 3-11 to 5-11, and you cost the Patriots the first round bye or whatever it was, and then they went on and lost in the postseason. That's the last time you had a positive net experience in week 17, 2019. So I think it's fitting the Dolphins win this game and win by 17 points, but it comes at the expense of Tua Tagovailoa can't play, and it casts the entire fan base into all of these debates again. So the curse of week 17 strikes again for the Dolphins, just in a different way. We won the game but lost the war, right? That's going to do it for us here on this Victory Monday Club Dub episode of Locked On Dolphins. Tone, not the same as the usual Club Dub, but I digress. A win's a win. The Dolphins are 500 for the first time since week 2. Chance to have a winning season. Chance to punch a playoff berth next weekend against the New York Jets. A lot to play for. We'll see how things unfold in the week ahead. I am Kyle Krabs. You can keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. I appreciate you guys as always for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day. I'm out of here. Go Fins.